Okay, we're just starting to service the Commando now. So I've got it up on the bench, got the straps on, just the last thing we want is for the bike to come off the stand. And I've taken the petrol tank off, which is sort of two studs at the front and then like a strap along the back with two bolts in. So I just mention that because I think the petrol tank is a bit sort of quite complicated to fit on the bike with 4 bolts, more complicated perhaps than it should be, and I think that's possibly down to the fact, that when they designed the Commando, it was a brand new frame and it was a big rush job, and maybe for instance, I'll go back a bit. For instance, they didn't really have time to sort out the footrests and that, and that's how the Z plates really have come about, which enhance the look of the bike, ironically, because they had the basic frame, but things like the foot peg mountings and rear brake mountings, weren't there. So they added the Z plates, and I think, which is one of the sort of Commando's sort of pluses really, although they're put in there out of necessity because they didn't have time to develop the frame properly, and I think the same goes with the tank a bit. There's a basic frame with a big top rail, and so the easy thing was just to put the tank onto the bracket here, which is a separate bracket, and then have a strap underneath, so there's no actual fixings on the frame for the tank. I'm not sure. Anyway, tank's out the way, so that's good. So we can get to the head to do all the tappets and that. Now the first job, I was taking this side panel off as well. The first job I'm going to do is to drain the oil, which is a complete pain in the backside, because most of the oil will be in the oil tank in our case, because of course, if you follow these videos, I have the anti-wet sump valve, the anti-drain valve fitted to mine, and so that means my bike doesn't wet sump, and this is about the only disadvantage for me, is that all the oil is still in the tank. If the bike wet sumps, most of the oil will be in the engine, and then you can just drain it out the bottom, which is a lot easier. But most of my oil will still be in the tank, and of course this is the drain plug, which is right over the top of the Z plate. So you just have to get, what I've got is like a little sort of plastic chute. We'll see it, I'll put it on in a minute. It's not brilliant, but it guides most of the oil into the into the oil drain bucket that I'm going to put there. And then, having drained that, we'll be draining the rest of the oil that's in the sump and taking off the drain plug and also the oil, the sort of mesh oil filter that's under there. We'll look at that in a minute. Okay, anyway, so first job, drain the oil. Let's crack on with that. Not my favourite job. I mean, you can rebuild a bike and this, that and the other, but one job is always a complete pain, draining the oil. There you go. Okay, so I've got my bendy bit of plastic under, so I wedged it under the tank. I've got a drip tray, and hopefully when I undo the drain plug, it will go down the plastic chute and into the drip tray, and not all over the garage floor, which has happened in the past. And that oil, when it gets on the, it's a nightmare. Right, there we go. If it gets on the garage floor, it's amazing how it spreads. Come on, here we go. Good. Just worried this plastic thing might slip out of position. Right, good. Like I say, because of all the jobs in rebuilding an engine, I think draining the oil is the worst, especially on these, as I say, with the drain plug, right, it's right over the top of the Z plate. But on most bikes, if you don't have an anti-drain valve, you just leave the bike for a few days or a week or whatever, the oil will drain from the tank into the sump, and you can just drain it out the sump, which is a lot easier, or at least virtually all the oil will come out of the sump. That's good. Yeah, it's looking pretty. I was saying the oil's black, which is to be expected. I'm just looking now. There's certainly no obvious signs of debris in the oil, which is good. I think we've got the magnetic drain plug and the and also we've got the little gauze filter in the sump. We'll be looking at those, and of course, this being an 850, we've got the spin-on oil filter underneath the sort of just behind the back wheel, sort of up here, and obviously we'll be changing that. But I can't see into that. What I've been doing is, I mean, I'm looking at the oil to see if there's any bits in it or any telltale signs of problems, which I'm not expecting because there's no problems with the bike. So everything's running as it should. So this should just be a straightforward service. There's no problems to address as such. Okay, so the first gaff of the day, I've ordered all the parts I need, or I thought I'd ordered all the parts I needed for the service, got everything ready before I start, but I forgot, and I've ordered all new washers, but I forgot to buy a new washer for the drain plug on the oil tank. I've got one for the sump, but I forgot to get one for the oil tank, new copper washer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reuse this old one, and I'm going to anneal it. That means sort of like to re-soften it by heating it to cherry red, and in our case we're then going to quench it. So I'm heating that until it's cherry red. I don't know if you were to see the colour on the video, and then I'm going to quench it in some water. Now I'm not, no, look, it's cherry red already, it's only a thin washer. Can you see that glowing? I'm sure you can. Yeah, okay, now I'm not an engineer or metallurgist or whatever. Now some people say quench and some people say don't quench, and they're metallurgists. They don't seem to be able to agree one way or the other. So I tend to quench. And I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, but that's what I do in the absence of any firm evidence in the other direction. So that's been annealed. That should now be soft, so that when I put it back on, it will like reseal. And also, as ever, I shall put some Loctite on the threads, not to lock it, but to help seal it so it doesn't leak. Because of course, if that does leak, that's a total pain in the backside, because we have to drain all the oil tank again to get it off to reseal it. So we really don't want that leaking. Right, there we go. I put some thread seal on there, some Loctite, annealed the washer, put it back in dead tight. I'll put it straight back in because otherwise that'll keep dripping, you know, for days and days, and there'll be horrible bits of oil all down the back of the Z plates and everything. And I always say, you know, don't worry about leaving a little bit of old oil, engine oil in the tank. You're going to change 95, 98% of the oil. There's always going to be 2% of the old oil in there. That's fine. Don't get hung up on trying to get rid of 100% of the oil. Okay, that's fine. Just, you know, take out, you know, that's why I've put this plug back in. I could leave it dripping for like 2 days, but no point. You're changing the oil, changing 95, 98% of the oil, put the plug back in. A, you won't forget it, and B, it won't drip. Okay, so having drained the oil from the actual tank, I'm going to drain it now from the sump. So we've got the drain plug here, and then that's a gauze filter. So first of all, we'll be undoing the drain plug, draining any oil out the sump, and then we'll be undoing this big nut here to have a look at the filter. I think that I've got a magnetic, is it magnetic? I think it is, the sump plug. And so if there's any, we'll check for any bits of iron that are stuck to that. If there are any, that's bad news, because they've got to come, you know, most of the engine's alloy. So if there's any bits of iron, which alloy of course it's not magnetic. So if there are any bits of iron stuck to that, they've got to come from like the bearings or something like that, which is bad news. So hopefully there won't be any. So going to undo that and drain those two now. Okay, yeah, so we've got the drain plug out now, and it is indeed magnetic. We've got this little stem on it, so I'm just going to wipe that now and see what we got. We just got a very, yeah, a little bit of sludge, oil sludge. I'm just looking, but there's nothing, yeah, just what we might imagine on a new engine, just a few little sort of very few little bit of iron, sort of iron fines, but only a very few bits. You know, just looking at the oil there, look, there's nothing in it. So yeah, it's just, you know, a few little bits of iron, you know, very few filings. So that's fine. Obviously, if you take it apart and there's loads of bits of stuck onto this magnet, then we know we've got problems. So that's a good sign. So always check that. Okay, so I've got a new copper washer for the drain plug, so I'm going to put that on, and again I'll put some Loctite on around the threads for added security to try and stop leaks. And again, I'll put that back in now again, so I don't forget to put it in later on. We've all done that, forget to, you know, and then you pull the new oil in and out it comes the bottom. And all the stop drips and make sure you don't forget to put it back in later. So I'll do that now. And just one other thing about this drain plug. Well, I remember the weird thing was the socket that fitted it was a 14mm. I tried AF and I tried Whitworth, but the socket that was best fit was 14mm. So I don't know, but there you go.